if you kind of try and think like a plant and what they need, then you're much more apt to have that success. So it isn't a question of bullying over nature, you know, like, it's going to work, right? You have to kind of work with the plant because, by golly, they really know what they're doing.
As climate change progresses, people throughout Kodiak try to figure out what effects this might have on fisheries, as that is essential to our economy. However, plants and gardening are a big part of our way of life on an island, but a lot of us take the natural beauty for granted. I interviewed gardeners and plant lore specialists to figure out what climate change might mean for our flora. One of the main things I learned is that naturalists have a lot of unanswered questions regarding plants and climate change, but they are prepared to adapt for whatever changes come.
So in gardening, I have seen changes. Now, you know, climate change is like this. And some people think, oh wow, we had the coldest winter 2 years ago in 50 years. That must mean climate change. Not necessarily, because there are peaks and valleys with all that kind of climate.
There's cycles, there's patterns, there's human influence, there's agricultural influences.
But in the garden, yes, I have seen continual warmth.
You see an increase in plant growth.
But I have noticed a tighter grouping of the plants that are available at the same time.
I've seen the spruce line go up and the alder line go up, and I've seen snow in the middle of the island disappearing.
You do have that increase in carbon dioxide, you see that increased growth. But what that does is it changes the dynamics of the water system. So the water system in general, you see increased heated water, increased evaporation in the warmer climates. That evaporation goes up, you change climate patterns, you see movements and winds and changes, and that's changing weather. So the first thing you're seeing is changes in weather. So you can't just talk about the effects of climate change on plants without thinking about how that's changing weather.
Right. So natural things that might be kind of tough on your plants, it would be strong winds that can break or snap stems and leaves. Strong winds also affect whether or not we get fruit. So we can have cherry blossoms and maybe apple blossoms, or even salmonberry blossoms, but if the wind is too strong, we've got too much rain, then it strips the flowers off, and the pollinators don't come out. So you might have bees kind of hanging out in a little nest, you know, in the wood or down in the ground, and they're not going to come out and pollinate. So even though the blossoms will be there, the pollinators are not.
So phytoplankton increases its growth when you have more carbon dioxide. It's like fertilizer for it. And the phytoplankton, if it is then not all eaten by zooplankton and by other animals, it eventually uses up all the nutrients in the surface water, in the sunlit surface water, and then some of those cells will die if they run out of nutrients.
Algae is very interesting because some species are actually, with the research, they're doing a lot better, if you will, under acidified conditions. So they're growing and they're multiplying a lot more. Other species of algae aren't doing as well. And so what I would predict is food webs could potentially really change a lot. So some algae might completely take over that maybe they're not around that much right now. So just overall food webs will probably change. And then
in the ocean, at first in a region, you think that the plant production is fantastic because you have increased growth because you've got carbon dioxide feeding the plants. But then, depending on where you are in the ocean, if there's nothing to eat the plant, then that plant, the green material, the algae, settles to the bottom of the ocean. And what happens when it gets to the bottom of the ocean? Bacteria start to feed on it. It dies. Bacteria release carbon dioxide. So now, because of the production, on the bottom of the ocean, you actually see the opposite effect. You see increased ocean acidification because of it.
And that process has been hailed as our saving grace, because the oceans take up all this carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and just transport it down to the deep ocean somewhere. and that was considered a really good thing. Well, but in nature, nothing ever goes away completely.
What we are doing now will affect our children and our grandchildren, and so how we're leaving the planet is a big deal.